And finally, Senator Wallace, you'll have this final question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Saint-Denis, Senator Joyal asked you to comment on what studies you may have that would reflect on the effectiveness of minimum mandatory sentences, what benefits there may be, and we've heard your answer. I won't ask you to repeat it. But what it reminds me of, and it's a subject that's come up repeatedly and in other circumstances and other bills around this table, the question always seems to arise in the context of whether mandatory minimums are effective as a deterrent. What I understand is that the principles of sentencing involve other objectives. That's one, certainly the deterrent factor, but there are other factors, denunciation of criminal activity being one other. And when I think of the evidence that was given by Minister Nicholson, he clearly said that one of the objectives of Bill C-15 was to remove criminals, those involved in trafficking, production for the purpose of trafficking, drugs, exporting, importing, serious drug criminals, to remove them from the street, and during the periods of time they're not on the street, that there would be a benefit to the community since you've taken them out of the drug trade for that period of time. And furthermore, by having removed them from their drug production, drug trafficking, it would be disruptive. It would be disruptive to the production trafficking business, which to a large extent is a business of organized crime. I'm just wondering since you were involved in the preparation of the bill and the purposes that we're obviously aware of what the purposes of the bill are, I'm wondering what your comment might be on that, and in particular, Minister Nicholson's thoughts.
Well, clearly, and I alluded to this earlier, if we're imprisoning, segregating violent offenders in the drug trade, that has to have some kind of a beneficial effect to the community. These are individuals who will not be out committing their offenses and threatening or endangering citizens. So clearly that has to have some impact. And I know that my minister is very interested in that element of it. So that has to be, I think, recognized as something that is beneficial. I don't know that I can add a whole lot more to that. I mean, we will be putting away individuals who are seriously dangerous individual, and if they're not actively involved in criminal activity outside with the potential threat of the use of weapons and the use of violence, I think that's to the good.
When I hear you say that, and having heard Minister Nicholson say much the same, for me, it is, and I think for most people who don't know the ins and outs of the criminal code, hearing that, it is so logical, it is such an extension of common sense. I personally don't think I'd need a study to confirm that. If those involved in the drug trade are off the streets, there has got to be a benefit to the public, and mandatory minimums will keep them off the street for later periods. So again, I wouldn't be looking for a study to confirm that. I think I would know enough to realize that's a logical consequence, but maybe others think differently. Thank you.
I may have the final word, but are we catching the real people, the real one? That's the question.
We're catching some violent offenders. I'm sure we will. Are we? I guess maybe your question is: are we catching everyone?
Well, my question is that Monsieur Saint-Denis, and well, I know we have other witnesses coming in, but we started late for another of the Justice Bill. Let's look at the trade of drugs in schools. Every Canadian knows that there's a huge phenomenon of drug trade and exchange in schools. And nobody agrees with that, but it's there. Are we going to catch, because of this bill, are we going to be satisfied because we're going to catch a young Canadian because he's distributing cannabis or ecstasy or whatever to his colleagues in school? Probably he's doing that for someone else.
You know, I would suggest that there are some people who will be happy about catching people, whether they're students or whether they're adults who traffic in schools. I know a lot of parents who will be more than happy to see individuals like that removed from the school. But we won't be catching just those individuals. We'll be catching others who are violent and who use weapons and so on and so forth.
Merci, M. Saint-Denis. Ça a été encore une fois un plaisir de vous avoir comme...
Thank you very much, Mr. Saint-Denis. Once again, it was a pleasure to have you as a witness. You enlightened us and you provided a lot of information.
Just to install itself. Nous suspendons pour quelques minutes.